A people carrying memory across deserts. That is the Jewish story. Not just the memory of God's covenant, but the memory of exile, of survival against all odds. To be Jewish has never been only about belief. It has been about remembering, and carrying that remembrance through centuries of loss and return. The pattern began long ago. In the 6th century before the Common Era, Babylonian armies stormed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and carried much of the people into exile. By the rivers of Babylon, the psalmists wept and swore they would never forget Zion. Even in foreign lands, they prayed toward Jerusalem, binding themselves to the dream of return. When the Persians allowed them back, they rebuilt the temple. Yet the memory of exile was already etched into their story, a reminder that home could be lost in a single generation. Centuries later, the Romans came. After revolt and resistance, the Second Temple was torn down, and again the people scattered, across North Africa, across Europe, across Asia. This time, the exile would stretch not for decades, but for centuries. Jews became a people of dispersion, a people who prayed in many tongues but whispered one city's name in every service. The dream of return kept burning, even when return seemed impossible. And in the lands of exile, suffering multiplied. In medieval Europe, Jews were blamed for plagues, accused of killing Christ, accused of poisoning wells. Pogroms swept through villages in Russia and Poland, leaving bodies in the snow and families on the road again. Whole communities were uprooted with little more than their scrolls and their songs, repeating the old pattern: exile, survival, holding the covenant through the darkness. Then came the Holocaust, the Shoah. 6 million dead. Whole cultures extinguished in camps and ghettos. For centuries, Jews had carried the fear of annihilation as a shadow memory. Now it became unbearable reality. The sacred vow emerged: never again. Never again would Jews be without a refuge, without a home, without the power to defend themselves. This vow was not just political. It was spiritual, visceral, etched into the bones of a people who had seen their children herded to death. So when the State of Israel was founded in 1948, it was experienced not just as the birth of a nation, but as the return from millennia of exile. Zionism was more than politics. It was prophecy fulfilled, the covenant renewed, the longing of countless generations finally realized in stone and soil. For Jews across the world, Israel became not only a homeland, but an existential assurance that exile would no longer be their fate. And yet, with return comes shadow. The vow of never again brings resilience, unity, innovation. But it also brings vigilance that can harden into fear, fear that can harden into defensiveness, and defensiveness that can lead to violence. When you have carried exile in your blood for 2,000 years, you do not easily trust. When you have seen your people annihilated, every threat feels existential. The covenant to survive can turn into a fortress mentality, where walls and weapons seem like the only guarantee. This is the Jewish paradox. Exile carved resilience, a genius for survival, and a relentless capacity to endure. But exile also carved scars, a trauma that whispers, they will always come for you. Even when power is regained, the fear of powerlessness lingers. Israel is both miracle and scar tissue, a nation born from hope and from trauma. The archetype of exile and return lives on. It fuels Jewish strength, Jewish creativity, Jewish continuity. But it also fuels the anxiety that without vigilance, history will repeat. And so the sacred vow never again stands, not only as a shield against destruction, but also as a question for the future: how to honor the memory of exile without letting it become a prison of fear. A people carrying memory across deserts, through Babylon, through Rome, through the fires of Auschwitz, into the streets of Jerusalem. That memory is indestructible. The challenge now is to let memory be a root, not a chain. To let never again mean life protected for all, not only life protected from all. To let the covenant of survival become also a covenant of peace.